This is Lisa from Mobile Tech Review, and this is the OnePlus 5, the OnePlus's latest Android phone. And I almost said flagship because it kind of sort of is, and that's the interesting thing about what OnePlus has become. They were the disruptor. They started it all with the kind of mid-range price phone that really batted way above. You know, it really pushed against flagship territory, particularly in performance, but the price was great. It was like $399, so I was like, wow, what a deal. So now the prices are going up, so is the quality, the fit, and the finish, and some nice creature comforts on here. But now we're talking about $479 to $539 in US dollars. Of course, it's going to be priced differently if you're in a different country from that. So that $500 segment is really a tough one. You're almost at flagship pricing, but not quite. You're $100 or $200 less maybe, but you're not in that bargain kind of category pricing, $400 and below, where you feel like, wow, I'm getting a lot for my money. Hopefully, potentially, with some phones you actually do. So is it worth it? We're going to find out now. So as ever, OnePlus phones are GSM unlocked phones. So that means they work on AT&T, T-Mobile, their offshoot carriers, any GSM network. This is not for Sprint. This is not for Verizon. Supports a lot of LTE bands. And as you can see here, we have a T-Mobile SIM at the moment. And it supports things like voice over LTE and Wi-Fi calling, which is always nice to have. Sometimes if you get a non-carrier phone, well, you don't always get those things. 5.5-inch full HD AMOLED display. That's 1920 by 1080. This is the exact same display that was used in the OnePlus 3T. We used AIDA64 to actually look at the display model, but they've added in DCI-P3 color support. This is doubtless through software or firmware, either way. So let's take a look right here, and you can see that we got night mode. We have reading mode as well on here. Under screen calibration, this is where you have your default, which is kind of a happy medium between sRGB and DCI-P3. There is your sRGB. It gets a little less colorful looking. And DCI-P3 is the warmest. I think most people are going to want to leave it at default, or you could do custom and, well, roll your own, whatever makes you happy there color-wise. Inside we have the Snapdragon 835, which is currently the latest, greatest, fastest CPU you can get in an Android phone. Now, the configuration, the 479 configuration has 6 gigs of RAM, which is pretty nice. Most phones, flagship phones these days, only have 4 gigs, and that's fast DDR4 low-power XRAM, and you get 64 gigs of fast UFS 2.1 storage. Now, the $539 model gets you 8 gigs of RAM. That's a first. Wow, 8 gigs of RAM in a phone, and 128 gigabytes of storage. So lots of stuff in there for your money. So there you go. Yes, it's not a cheap phone compared to the previous OnePlus models, but that's some pretty nice specs right there. And the performance on this is just fast. Oxygen OS is a very lightweight OS that's really very close to what you would see on something like the Pixel. You got their own little customized, never settle, screen over here that you can change as you see fit on it, but otherwise it's pretty much close to stock, and the settings have mostly normal things that you would see on a vanilla Android phone, with a couple of advanced things added, like the color temperatures that you saw right there. We've got gaming do not disturb mode, something that Samsung's been doing with their Galaxy phones lately. You can turn on the go storage for USB if you want to use external flash drives and such with that sort of thing. Pocket mode, choose your audio codec. But all in all, it's pretty close to just your basic Android, and that's fine with me. I like clean Android, and that's going to be one of the segments for this phone. The folks who just still don't like TouchWiz, they don't like heavy overlays, they don't like the LG UI, all of those sorts of things. So your choices become more limited once you want something that's closer to a clean Android experience. So let's talk about the elephant in the room. Some people have said that this looks an awful lot like the iPhone. You know, in person, I'm sorry, I just don't think it looks that much like the iPhone. Witness, there are phones like the Mi 5S that really are clones of the iPhone, and the Huawei P10, honestly, really, I had trouble figuring out which to pick up, this phone, the actual iPhone, or the Huawei when I had it in my hand. So yes, the finish here is pretty similar. We have a nice matte black finish that loves fingerprints. So let's switch over to the iPhone 7 Plus and compare, because then you have the dual camera similarity on the back. Granted, you're not going to mistake these for each other just because this is the crazy loud pink edition of the iPhone, but yes, they both have cameras in a similar place, and OnePlus said that was mostly because if they tried to put it in the middle, it made the phone even thicker. The flash is pretty much similar location because that's the intelligent place to put the flash. Oh well, and then there's the microphone hole. So yeah, there are some similarities there. If we take a look at the the aesthetic of the phone. This one has a different shape, a different curve over here. It just, to me, isn't that much of a clone. Now on the side we have, okay, we have the volume controls and we have the mute slider over here, and everybody say, oh, that's just like the iPhone. Okay, so let me just bring out, why did nobody say that about the OnePlus 3T that we have right here? That's the same exact thing going on. Funny that, right? Also the same antenna lines, but they show more on the OnePlus 3T because of the gray finish versus the black on this. Also, when it comes to the camera UI, people have said, oh, look, they copied the iPhone camera UI there. Well, you know, there are some similarities, no kidding. Instead, let's just call this a general lack of imagination in the world of camera phone UIs, because I'm going to switch over to the Pixel, because guess what you're looking at here is pretty much just the stock Android UI. This is the Pixel XL over here. So I make my point right there. The phone has a fingerprint scanner just like the OnePlus 3T, and it is very fast. I happen to like it on the front because I don't have to pick up the phone off the desk. Some people like it on the front, some people like it on the back. There's that. It has a factory installed screen protector, which I think you can probably see along the edges over here. Picks up fingerprints really nicely, but oh well. The back is anodized aluminum, and it's a nice classy phone. You know, compared to the OnePlus 3T, I think they have refined the look and the design, certainly. And it feels a little thinner. I mean, there really isn't much of a difference going on there in terms of the thickness of the phone, but it feels more ergonomic and a little bit less abrupt on the edges. They've curved the sides a little bit more there. So it's a nice looking phone too. It looks pretty premium. Like I said, I took it out of the box and I thought, oh, that's nice. You have your bottom speaker right here. It sounds pretty tinny, sorry to say. USB-C connector for charging. Still supports dash charging, so that's 5-volt 4-amp charger. And it is darn fast. It's still their own proprietary solution, so whenever you want that super fast charging, you got to bring your dash charger with you. Headphone jack here, awesome, nice to see, and that's about it. Speaking of dash charging, this has a 3,300 milliamp battery that is sealed inside. Got a solid 4.5 hours of actual screen on time. That's actual use time, not the time that's spent sleeping in your pocket or on your desk and that sort of thing. Snapdragon 835 is powerful, but it's also very power efficient. And the 1080p AMOLED display is likewise pretty power efficient, particularly if you're using a black background, like the default one on the OnePlus 5. And that, speaking of iPhone cloniness, I would say, you know, of course, they want to use a predominantly black background for better power savings, because AMOLED actually uses no power when displaying blacks, but that really is a pretty blatant ripoff of the iPhone desktop picture. Now, one thing that might seem retro to some folks is the fact that we actually still have capacitive buttons over on the side. They light up only when you touch them, so you don't see them otherwise. You do have your choice of swapping location, which is back, which is home, depending on whether you're used to the Android way or the Samsung way. And if you rather have them on screen, you can turn that on, and then it'll be like other Android phones that don't use capacitive buttons. One of the hallmarks of a OnePlus phone is the fact that it feels very fast and very fluid. It has top specs in terms of performance. Now, there's been a little brouhaha. XDA developers discovered that the little cores, that's the low power cores, when benchmarks are run in some 3D games too, they're allowed to run without as much of a thermal throttle, which can make about a 5% improvement in benchmark speed. So let's get that out of the way. I'm still going to show the benchmark scores. Even if you subtract 5%, this is still very respectable. By the way, we got 3D mark here, and they don't actually game 3D mark at all. So that's just straight normal running for the CPU and the GPU inside the phone. It's a fast performing phone. This is Antutu right here. It benchmarks very well. And like I said, even if you take out that 5%, it's fast, it's fluid, it's nice. It's not the sort of phone that's going to bog down either, because there's not much of an overlay going on here in terms of the user interface. The phone is running what they call Oxygen OS. If you're familiar with OnePlus 3, you know that's what they call their overlay on top of Android 7.1.1. So we're still at Nougat on this because Android O has not been released yet, so that's fair. Now, OnePlus, they try hard to get out OS updates, and they're a small company, or, you know, their parent company is the same company that owns Oppo, a bigger phone manufacturer, but they're a small group within. So sometimes they're not exactly the fastest, but they will get there eventually. Speaking of that, we've already gotten an OS update on this that improves the camera. The camera on this, well, they made a big deal of that because you got the dual cameras here, and it's sort of like a copy of the iPhone 7 Plus functionality, which is neat because that's a very nice feature. You have your standard sort of wide-angle lens, normal wide-angle lens, and then you've got a telephoto lens here, and you have a 16 megapixel sensor for the standard and a 20 megapixel sensor for the telephoto lens, so you've got some high megapixel ratings here. These are Sony sensors. One of the challenges, though, they don't have enlarged pixel sensor sites. They're not very large sensors, so that means if you put a lot of megapixels on a not very big physically sized sensor, you're not going to have super duper low light performance. So even with this little dual tone LED flash here, low light performance is okay. It's not really fantastic, I'm sorry to say, on this. Now here's some sample pictures right here, and it can do a beautiful job outdoors. And that's with the standard lens. And sometimes it has a little problem with macro shots. Our flowers are actually not in focus there. And one thing that can contribute to a loss of focus is the fact this is electronic stabilization. It doesn't have optical image stabilization. So phones that cost more, well, they're gonna give you some features like OIS, and that can make a difference, honestly. Like the iPhone 7 Plus, it also does a bokeh mode if you're using the telephoto mode 2x zoom mode. So this is the bokeh version, and it named the file bokeh to give us a clue, which is nice. So the background's a little bit blurred out, and this is what it looks like otherwise, obviously further away, and everything is in sharp focus there. So it does the same functional sort of thing. It does a reasonable job of it. Now, one thing to keep in mind is I wish they would give us control over this. It's a 2x zoom, but the telephoto is actually only around 1.5 to 1.6x. The rest is a software zooming and interpolation, so that can reduce the sharpness as well, and that's a shame. So I would rather just be given the hardware zooming capability on this, and that's that. So I'm afraid after OnePlus pumped us all up about how awesome these cameras are going to be, they're okay cameras, but they're not exceptional cameras. They're not the same quality camera you're going to get with something like the Galaxy S8. And again, well, they're less expensive too, so hey, that's okay. I think a lot of the problem is that they kind of got us all amped up thinking this was going to be the best thing you've ever seen in imaging. And not so much, but you know, they do software updates, and I suspect they're going to improve some of the algorithms, and the photos will get better and better, but there's probably only so much they can do in low light with this, given the size of the sensors. You get a 16 megapixel front-facing camera, by the way, so oh my goodness, people are going to see every zit on your face for those selfies. Other goodies include Bluetooth 5.0, which there's no exceptional use case for yet, but in the future that would be nice. We've got Wi-Fi 802.11ac now with MIMO, the usual NFC as well. Fast LTE on board, and as you saw, Wi-Fi calling, all the features that you want are there. So let's talk about the many elephants in the room, that is flagship phones. The Galaxy S8, of course, which is the smaller of the two Galaxy offerings, lately Samsung's been selling it for around $625 in the US, so that's not a whole lot more money than this fellow right here. It starts to become tempting. Of course, the S8 Plus is still going to be $100 more than that, but Samsung, because they're a big company who can afford to do loss leader promotions, is doing a devilish thing. In honor of the OnePlus 5, they've been having a trade-in program in the United States where you can get the S8 for as cheap as $324 and $424 if you want the S8 Plus. That kind of hurts. And with the S8, you're getting things like an even more beautiful design, a higher resolution, and even more striking AMOLED display, an SD card slot, and water resistance. Oh dear. Then there's the LG G6, which is another high-resolution, good-looking phone. A little thicker, a little chunkier, sure, but it's also selling for around $500 with some carriers in the United States. And wow, you know, that's the hard place to be in when you're around $500. When people start thinking they're just paying a little bit more, how much more than they can get. And then, of course, there's those of you who have the OnePlus 3T. These guys have a lot in common. Is it worth the upgrade? Probably not so much. A lot of the goodness in the OnePlus 5 is already in the OnePlus 3T. Yes, you're not getting a Snapdragon 835, but I haven't heard anybody saying their OnePlus 3T was running too slow. You have a decent single camera on the back, which I'm okay with, given the fact that the telephoto lens on this can be a little bit less sharp and not really so great in low light. Yeah. As ever, OnePlus sells a variety of fairly reasonably priced accessories, actually. We have a bunch of the shell cases here. These are about $20 a pop, and you have a couple of different wood finishes available, which are nice looking. You've got the sandstone finish one. You remember sandstone in OnePlus, right? Carbon fiber here. So these are pretty darn nice for the price, actually. So there you have it, the OnePlus 5, available pretty much everywhere June 30th. And you know, for $479, call it $500, especially if you want to throw in one of those shell cases or something like that. It's a nice phone. like I said, the minute I took it out of the box, I was kind of like, ooh, it's nice. It feels good in hand. It feels like quality. It has a nice big screen, but the footprint's pretty manageable too. The challenge is going to be all those flagship phones that might offer the things that you're also interested in, like water resistance, for example, or a micro SD card slot, and they aren't here. But you know, you're saving a couple $100 too. And then there's the other argument, like I said too. Some of you don't like the bloatware or the user interface on Samsung with the TouchWiz or an LG's UI and that sort of thing. And you get a very clean experience here. I'm switching from a Pixel to using this, and it's not bothering me at all. It feels, well, an awful lot like using the Pixel in many ways. So there's certainly things to like here. I'm Lisa from MobileTechReview. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more cool tech videos, and thumbs up if you like this vid. Oh hey, and we're on Patreon now too if you want to give us a hand. Check out the link below.